The wind had already quieted when he stepped outside. The sea stretched endlessly, a silver sheet breathing under the faint light of the moon. Waves rolled in with the same rhythm as his thoughts, steady, patient, eternal. For 30 years, Elias had tended the lighthouse on this forgotten stretch of coast. The building rose like a pale pillar against the night, its glass dome turning slowly, casting a soft halo that brushed the waves in golden arcs. It was the only moving thing for miles. He pulled his coat tighter around him and listened, not to the wind but to the absence of it. The air was heavy with salt and the faint hum of the lantern above, a sound that had long since become the heartbeat of his nights. He walked to the edge of the cliff, his boots crunching against pebbles slick with mist. Down below, the water broke softly against the rocks, whispering to the shore. Somewhere beyond that, far out at sea, the foghorn moaned, deep and mournful, like a memory calling his name. He smiled faintly. He knew that sound better than he knew his own voice. It had been his companion on countless nights like this one, when the world seemed suspended between waking and dreaming. Inside the lighthouse, the air was warmer, thick with the scent of oil and old wood. The spiral staircase rose before him, narrow and familiar, its steps worn smooth by years of solitude. As he climbed, the flickering glow of the lantern above grew brighter, spreading across the whitewashed walls like the slow unfurling of dawn. At the top, he paused by the great glass window. The lens turned silently, spreading light into the dark horizon. The sea caught it, carried it, broke it into 1,000 fragments that shimmered like fireflies. He stood there for a long time, watching the world pulse with the rhythm of light. Then, softly, almost absently, he whispered to the night, "Still here." No one answered. There was only the hum of the lantern and the deep sigh of the ocean. He sat by the small desk near the window, where a logbook lay open, a book filled with dates, weather notes, and fragments of thoughts. He dipped his pen into ink and wrote slowly, deliberately, as though writing to time itself. Light maintained, winds calm, he steady, dreams vivid. He set the pen down and closed his eyes. For a moment, he thought he could hear the faint sound of footsteps, bare, soft, like someone walking along the sand below. But when he opened his eyes, there was only the sea. Always the sea. The beam of the lighthouse swept over the horizon again, cutting through mist and darkness, reaching out like a heartbeat searching for another. And as the waves whispered against the rocks, Elias leaned back, letting the rhythm of the sea blend with the hum of the lantern, letting both carry him toward that space between thought and dream. The shore before sleep. Sleep came to Elias like fog, slow, silent, without edges. One moment he was staring at the steady pulse of the lantern, and the next, the world had dissolved into water. He stood ankle-deep in the tide, though he couldn't remember how he'd come down from the lighthouse. The sand beneath his feet was cool and damp, and the moon hung impossibly large above the horizon, casting a silver road across the sea. Everything was still. No wind, no cry of gulls, not even the rhythmic hush of waves. It was the kind of silence that felt alive, the kind that waited. Then came the sound. At first, it was faint, almost imagined, a deep, resonant hum that seemed to rise from the ocean floor. It wasn't a song, not quite, but it carried melody, emotion. Elias turned toward it, drawn by something older than memory. The water began to glow faintly, ripples of blue light spiraling outward like breath. Shapes moved beneath the surface, slow, fluid, unhurried. He took a step forward, the cold water brushing against his knees, then his waist. When he looked down, he saw reflections that were not his own. A woman's face, eyes bright as morning, smiling faintly. He knew that face, not from the waking world, but from a time that had slipped beyond recall. He tried to speak her name, but the sea swallowed his voice. Instead, the humming grew stronger, the light deepened, and the water began to move as if it recognized him. He reached out his hand, and the glow wrapped around it, spiraling gently up his arm. It didn't burn. It was warm, familiar. The hum became a rhythm, soft and hypnotic, like a heartbeat against his skin. The world tilted. The horizon folded into itself, the sky and sea exchanging places until everything became one continuous expanse of color and sound. Elias floated, not in water but in memory, moments rising and dissolving like bubbles. He saw the lighthouse years ago, its light brighter, steadier. He saw himself younger, laughing on the shore with someone beside him, the same woman from the water. Her hair caught the wind, her laughter echoed like bells. And then she was gone. A storm, a night of fractured glass and endless rain. The light had never gone out since. Neither had he. The hum faded into the sound of waves again, the glow softening until the world was only water and sky. Elias drifted on his back, staring upward at 1,000 reflected stars. The sea spoke again, not in words, but in feeling, a deep, calm reassurance that nothing was ever truly lost, only changed, only waiting. He let go. The tide carried him, weightless, back toward the faint outline of the lighthouse, its beam sweeping the horizon like a gentle hand. The moment his fingers brushed the wet rocks of the shore, the world shifted. The hum of the lantern returned, the wooden stairs, the scent of oil and salt. Elias opened his eyes. He was sitting in his chair by the window, pen still in hand, the logbook open before him. The lantern above turned steadily, its beam cutting the night. On the page, in neat handwriting he didn't remember writing, was a single line. She sang beneath the waves tonight. Morning arrived like a soft hand on the shoulder. Light slipped through the narrow panes of the lantern room, pale and careful, as if it didn't want to disturb anything that might still be sleeping. Elias sat where the night had left him, spine curved to the old chair, fingers still resting near the open logbook. The ink on the last line had dried into a faint sheen. He traced the words with one knuckle without really touching them. She sang beneath the waves tonight. He closed the book and let the hinge breathe its small tired sigh. Below, the tide combed the shingle with patient strokes, collecting and releasing the pebbles in a rhythm the lighthouse had known long before him. He stood, joints murmuring, and wound the lantern one careful turn, listening for the steady purr that said all was well. It answered him like a cat. On the way down the spiral, his palm slid across the same iron rail he had held countless times before. The metal was cool and honest. Halfway, he paused at the landing where the wall wore a ring of polished touch. His touch, years upon years of solitary circles pressed into the paint. He imagined the ring as a halo, not for him, but for the work itself. Keepers keep, light keeps, sea keeps. The kitchen smelled faintly of brine and black tea. He set the kettle on the small blue flame and opened the narrow door to the outside. A morning mist lay close to the ground, tugging at the grass in quiet threads. The horizon, always straight as an oath, was soft today, the edge of the world erased and redrawn in a gentler hand. He took his tea to the bench that faced east. From there, the lighthouse became a companion rather than a home, its white flanks still damp, its glass crown winking once every lull in the mist. He sipped and let the heat travel through him, feeling the empty places grow warm. It wasn't the first time the sea had returned her to him. Sometimes it was a shell with an interior that flashed like rain. Sometimes it was a scrap of song snagged in a gull's cry. Once it had been a rope of seaweed knotted around a smooth stone, the knot exactly the kind her fingers used to make when she laughed at his clumsy ones. He had never told anyone. Who was there to tell? A small shape drifted in the waterline. At first he took it for a log, the sea's anonymous handwriting, but the tide nudged it shoreward with a peculiar care, as if delivering a letter. He stood, set the cup down, and walked the path beaten thin by his own steps. It was a board, weathered gray, no larger than his forearm. A nail still clung to one end like a stubborn thought. He lifted it, then turned it over. On the underside, shielded from the worst of the water, the paint had endured. A stripe of faded cinnabar and 2 hand-drawn stars in a child's careful geometry. The same stars she had shown him the first summer at the harbor, dipping the brush, tongue between teeth, saying, "There, now they'll always know where to find us." He didn't trust his voice, so he let silence do the remembering. The mist pressed closer, the kind that doesn't wet you so much as teach you how to be part of the air. He tucked the board beneath his arm and walked back, the lighthouse door admitting him with its familiar hinge cry. On the work table lay his small tin of tools. A brass ruler, a pencil sharpened to a modest point, a pot of clear oil for wood. He set the board down and wiped it gently with an old cloth, lifting a fine bloom of salt and sand. The stars brightened a little, not with new light, but with recovered clarity. He left them as they were, too sacred to fix, perfect in their unraveling. Later, after the chores, he climbed again to the lantern room. The mist had broken. The sea breathed in color now, a blue that kept its promises. He positioned the board on the sill where the sunlight could find it and stood back. The lens turned, sending its bright pulse out and out over the water. Each revolution caught the stars and let them go, caught them and let them go, as if the lighthouse itself were remembering with him. He closed his eyes, and for a moment the night returned in a hush. The hum under the waves, the warmth spiraling his arm, the sensation of being lifted not by water but by time. He saw her again, not as grief draws her, dim and distant, but as days had known her. The quick tilt of her head to listen, the way she tested a knot, the way she looked at the horizon as if it might answer her question. "Still here," he said, but this time he wasn't speaking to the dark. He was speaking to what remained when everything else had finished leaving. The afternoon loosened around him. He wrote in the logbook without looking at the words, not from carelessness but trust. Outside, the sea stitched its light to the shore with a thread that never broke. Gulls coasted in long, economical lines. Far beyond them, a trawler moved like a sentence ending correctly. As dusk leaned in, he lit the wick and watched the lantern swell to its evening heart. The glass breathed on the inside. He wiped it with a cloth he kept folded and ready. When the beam reached its full span, the room pressed a gentle hand to his back, a familiar approval. Down below, he set a small pan on the stove and listened to the first soft sizzle. The sound harmonized with the turning lens, with the sea on the stones, with the faint ticking from the barometer. He ate slowly, the way one reads a letter. When he was done, he rinsed the plate and set it upside down to dry, a small moon on a steel shore. Night gathered in seams rather than a single drop. Stars threaded themselves between the clouds. The lighthouse kept time. Before sleep, he took the board from the sill and placed it beside his bed. He did not pray. There was no need to tell the sea what it already knew, but he recited the keeper's plain creed in his head. Light maintained, horizon watched, names remembered. The words were not magic, but they were true. He lay down and felt the mattress take his weight like a friend who understands. The window admitted a thin ribbon of tide-scented air. Somewhere, a foghorn placed its note exactly where it belonged. Elias let the day loosen its knot. In the quiet, the sea offered him one more echo. Not a song this time, but breath, hers, his, the waters, braided together until there was no telling them apart. Sleep came again, not as escape but as passage. The sea had stilled again by morning. The horizon was pale, drawn thin as a breath held too long. Elias woke with a faint impression that something had been whispering to him in his sleep. Not words, but the rhythm of water against rock, patient and endless. He rose, the floor cool beneath his bare feet, and opened the shutters. The light rolled into the room in long stripes, soft and golden, as if the dawn had been diluted with memory. The board with the painted stars lay beside his bed, dry now, its surface smelling faintly of salt. He traced the faded cinnabar line with his finger, the wood grain rippling like the tide under his touch. Downstairs, he lit the stove and set the kettle to boil. The faint hiss of steam filled the silence. He poured the tea into a chipped cup and carried it outside, where gulls circled the cliffs in slow, unhurried spirals. Each one cried briefly before vanishing into the wide emptiness. Beyond the lighthouse's shadow, the beach stretched in muted colors, the gray of stones, the greenish-brown of seaweed, the dull shimmer of shells scattered like lost coins. He walked to the water's edge, the tide low, the air tasting of iron and distance. Something glinted near the surf, a shard of glass smoothed by waves. He bent to pick it up, turning it in the light. It was thick, old, a fragment of a lens perhaps, maybe once part of a ship's lantern. The edges had been tamed by time, dulled into silk. When he held it up, the morning sun broke through it in a single thin beam that fell over his hand. He smiled, the same small smile he reserved for the sea when it remembered to bring him pieces of the past. He slipped the shard into his pocket and began walking back up the hill. Inside the lighthouse, he placed the glass on the small shelf near the stairwell where he kept other relics. Driftwood shaped like letters, seashells that whispered, and smooth stones that carried the sound of waves even when dry. Each one was a message of sorts, though from whom he couldn't quite say. By afternoon, clouds gathered on the horizon, slow and deliberate, like thoughts forming after a long silence. He watched them through the lantern room's glass as the first drops began to strike, sharp and steady. Rain softened the edges of the world, blurring sea and sky into a single gray tone. Elias lit the lantern early. The flame caught easily, blooming in the oil's heart, and he adjusted the wick until the light was steady. The glass prism turned, scattering soft beams that cut through the rain. The air inside the room filled with warmth, the smell of burning oil and the faint tang of metal. He leaned against the railing, watching the beam sweep out to sea, a pulse of gold through the thickening fog. The rhythm calmed him as it always did. The light moved, paused, returned, like breathing, like remembering. Outside, thunder murmured, distant, rolling slowly across the horizon. He rested his forehead against the glass, feeling the faint vibration through the pane. He imagined the light reaching miles away, touching unseen ships, guiding sailors through the dark. Then, in one sweep of the beam, he thought he saw something, a figure standing near the rocks below, still silent, watching. He blinked. The beam passed again, and the spot was empty. Only the tide, rising now, foamed white against the stones. He stayed there long after, listening to the rain, to the deep hum of the sea beneath it. The wind picked up, tugging gently at the windows. The lantern kept its rhythm, unbroken. When he finally descended, the scent of the sea followed him down the spiral staircase. He wrote in the logbook before bed, his handwriting smaller tonight, like someone whispering to himself. Storm moving in, lantern strong, heard the waves calling. Then he paused, added one more line beneath it, slowly, deliberately. Saw someone by the shore. He sat for a while, staring at the ink, the room pulsing faintly with the rhythm of the lantern above. Then he closed the book, blew out the candle, and lay down. Outside, the rain deepened, the wind pressed against the windows, and the lighthouse, steadfast as always, continued to turn, its beam sweeping through the storm like a guardian remembering the path home. By the next morning, the storm had drifted east, leaving behind a sea that breathed like someone asleep. The clouds were low and colorless, the kind that erased the line between ocean and sky. The lighthouse stood washed clean, its stones gleaming, the smell of salt thick in the air. Elias descended the narrow stairs, the wood creaking in the same familiar pattern. The memory of last night, of the figure on the rocks, hung faintly behind his eyes, fragile as mist. He tried not to give it shape. Out here, solitude sometimes played tricks with distance, with the way light moved. That's what he told himself. He brewed his tea, ate a heel of bread, and stepped outside. The wind carried the soft hiss of retreating waves. When he looked down toward the shore, a pale fog was rising again, curling over the rocks like breath. It moved strangely, too heavy for morning mist, too deliberate. He walked down the path leading to the water, boots leaving small indentations in the wet sand. The fog thickened, swallowing the world a few paces ahead. The hum of the sea grew muted, as though muffled by a heavy curtain. He called out, half to test his voice, half to assure himself he was still part of the living world. No answer, only a faint splash somewhere unseen. He stood still. There, just at the edge of sight, a movement. Not wind, not shadow. Shape. Someone or something, standing near the surf, their outline blurred by the fog's folds. The shape didn't move, didn't waver. It was as if the mist had learned the shape of a person and refused to let go of it. He felt neither fear nor curiosity, only recognition. A strange calm spread through him, a quiet understanding he couldn't explain. He took a step forward. The figure turned, slowly, and for a brief second, the air cleared enough for him to see her face. The woman from his dreams, the one who had smiled beneath the water. Her eyes were the same deep gray as the sea before a storm, her hair glimmering with damp salt. She looked at him without surprise, as though she had always expected this moment. Then, as the fog swirled, she raised her hand, not a gesture of greeting but of silence. Her palm faced him, steady, patient. He froze, breath suspended. The sea surged behind her, a single slow wave curling higher than the rest. It didn't break, it folded soft as silk, and when it fell, the woman was gone. Only the fog remained, thicker now, pressing cold against his skin. Elias waited for a long time, staring at the place where she had stood. He thought he could still see the faint impression of her figure in the mist, like the afterimage of light burned into vision. Then the fog moved again, and even that was gone. He returned to the lighthouse without looking back. The steps up the hill felt heavier, the world quieter. Inside, he peeled off his coat and placed it by the door. The scent of rain clung to it, a scent mixed with something faintly floral, something he couldn't name but knew too well. In the lantern room, the light circled as it always did, oblivious to the living. Elias set his hand on the glass and closed his eyes. The faint hum beneath his palm vibrated softly, like a second heartbeat. He whispered into the quiet, "Was it you?" No answer came, only the echo of his own voice rebounding in the spiral of the tower. He stayed there until the light began to dim and the horizon faded into silver haze. Then, almost without realizing, he opened the logbook and wrote one simple line beneath the previous entry. "She came back today." When he closed the book, he didn't feel afraid. He only felt the strange peace of recognition, like a tide returning exactly when it was meant to. Outside, the fog thickened again, rising from the water to wrap the lighthouse in its soft, soundless arms. That night, the fog wrapped the lighthouse tighter than ever before. It moved like something alive, not drifting but breathing. The beam from the lantern stretched only a few feet before dissolving into white nothingness. The world had shrunk to the size of the tower itself, and Elias stood inside it, feeling as if the sea had swallowed everything else. He adjusted the wick, listening to the faint hiss of the flame. The light turned, slow and deliberate, brushing his shadow across the wall in rhythmic motion. For years that sound, the quiet hum of the lantern turning, had been his company, his clock, his comfort. But tonight, another sound began to weave itself through the air. First he thought it was the wind, a low, melodic hum, soft enough to mistake for imagination. But then it grew clearer, a voice, distant yet near, threading itself between the gears of the light. It didn't speak in words, but in tone, a sound that pulled at something deep within him. He moved closer to the glass, pressing his hand against the cold pane. The fog outside glowed faintly, illuminated by the circling beam. He could see movement, slow ripples of light, as if the mist itself were alive and shifting. Then the voice came again, clearer this time, just at the edge of hearing. A hum that turned into a single quiet phrase, so faint he couldn't tell whether he heard it with his ears or his heart. "Don't let it fade." Elias froze. His breath caught in his throat. He whispered back, his voice shaking with a strange, childlike hope. "Who's there?" Only silence. But the fog pulsed once, a subtle, living rhythm, before settling again. He descended the staircase, each step echoing through the hollow core of the tower. The sound of the sea below had changed too. No longer the calm rhythm of tide, but something slower, heavier, like the deep breath of a sleeping giant. The air tasted metallic, old. He opened the door that led outside. The fog pressed in immediately, cool and damp against his face. The world beyond was gone. The cliffs, the sea, the sky, all replaced by the endless whiteness. He stepped forward, one cautious foot after another, until the doorframe disappeared behind him. The beam of the lighthouse swept faintly overhead, its light diffused through the mist like liquid gold. The voice came again, closer this time, circling him like the tide. "The light remembers." He turned sharply, but there was nothing there. Only the sound, gentle, patient, like a lullaby hummed by the sea. He whispered again, barely breathing, "I remember too." Something brushed past him, the faintest movement like fabric in the wind. He reached out instinctively, and his hand passed through the fog, but for an instant he felt warmth, a pulse, a heartbeat, before it slipped away. Then, as suddenly as it had come, the fog began to thin. Shapes emerged, the outline of the cliff, the curve of the sea below. The storm was gone. The night was clear again. Elias stood alone, trembling, the sound of his own breath too loud in the returning silence. He looked up toward the lantern room. Its light spun steadily, patient as ever, casting long arcs across the dark water. When he returned inside, he found the logbook still open on the desk, though he was sure he had closed it earlier. A new line of writing marked the page, faint, delicate, and written in a hand not his own. "The sea keeps what it loves." Elias touched the ink. It was still wet. He closed the book slowly, the pages whispering like distant waves. The light above turned once more, circling endlessly, a heartbeat for the night, a promise never broken. And far below, hidden in the quiet deep, the sea hummed again, not a warning this time, but a song of remembering. That night, Elias dreamed not of storms or lanterns but of stillness, vast, endless stillness, the kind that lives beneath the waves, where sound travels slowly and time forgets how to move. He was standing on the seafloor. There was no weight, no breath, only light, ribbons of gold descending through clear blue water. Around him, the ocean swayed like a curtain, folding and unfolding in silence. The lighthouse stood above, distorted by the surface, its beam reaching downward instead of up, as if it were searching for him. He began to walk, though there was no ground, only the illusion of it. Each step left a faint shimmer like footprints made of air. Tiny fish darted past, flashes of silver and sapphire. The hum he'd heard before was there too, steady, low, vibrating through the water. It wasn't frightening. It was comforting, familiar, as though the sea were breathing for him. And then he saw her. She floated in the light, hair drifting like seaweed, eyes open and calm. The same eyes that had looked back at him through fog, through memory, through dream. She smiled, not with lips but with presence, and reached out her hand. When their fingers met, the world brightened. The hum deepened into a rhythm that sounded almost like a heartbeat. Hers, his, the ocean's, impossible to tell apart. The water around them rippled with color, threads of gold and pale green swirling together. He felt warmth spread through his chest, the kind of warmth he hadn't known in decades. No words passed between them, yet understanding flowed freely. Simple, complete. She showed him fragments. The night she'd gone out to sea, the storm, the lantern that had never gone out. He saw it all as if watching from both within and without, the sea folding time like pages of a book. When he tried to speak, the water carried his thoughts instead of his voice. "I kept the light. For you." Her smile deepened. "I know," she seemed to say. "The light never left. It only changed hands." The ocean pulsed again, a slow and endless breath. She placed her palm over his chest. a gesture of peace, not farewell, and the glow from her hand spread through him. The heaviness that had lived inside him for years began to dissolve, like sand drawn back into the tide. Then, just as gently, she stepped backward, her body dissolving into light. The hum softened until it became indistinguishable from silence. The sea shifted, folding upward. The lighthouse above him grew sharper, closer. He rose with it, carried not by effort but by something larger than will, the same force that moves tides, that remembers everything it touches. When his head broke the surface, the world was silver and still. The fog was gone. The stars hung low, reflected perfectly on the water. The lighthouse beam turned slowly, each revolution washing over him like a heartbeat. He drifted for a while, eyes half closed, the sound of the sea now gentle as breathing. The light found him again and again, steady, certain. When he finally woke, he was in his chair, back inside the lantern room. The light still turned. The sea was calm, but his hands were damp with salt water, and resting on the windowsill beside him was a single seashell, small, smooth, and impossibly warm to the touch. He turned it over and found words carved faintly on its underside, letters so small he had to tilt it toward the light to read them. "Home is where the light remembers you." He held the shell against his chest and closed his eyes. The hum was still there, softer now, tucked beneath his heartbeat. Outside, the beam of the lighthouse swept over the sleeping sea, steady and eternal, as if at last it knew exactly who it was shining for. The next morning, the world felt strangely quiet, not empty but expectant. The kind of silence that arrives after a question has been asked, but before the answer is spoken. Elias stood at the threshold of the lighthouse door, the wood damp beneath his hand, and looked out toward the sea. It was calm again, unnaturally so. The surface lay flat and unbroken, a sheet of dull silver under a washed-out sky. No gulls, no wind, just stillness. He descended the slope toward the water, the air carrying the faint scent of kelp and rusted metal. His boots sank into the soft sand. The tide was low, and the rocks, slick and dark, shone like wet mirrors. That's when he saw it, something half buried at the edge of the tide line. It caught the light in a way no stone could. He knelt and brushed the sand away. It was a pocket watch. Old brass, the glass face fogged and cracked but intact. The chain, thin and delicate, was twisted around a clump of seaweed, as if the ocean had chosen to deliver it rather than lose it. He turned it over. On the back, worn by salt and years, were faintly engraved initials, M. He froze. Those were his. For a moment, the air itself seemed to tighten. He hadn't owned a watch in decades, not since before she was lost. He remembered giving it to her the day she'd gone out to sea, laughing at how heavy it was for such a small thing. He thumbed the latch open. The mechanism clicked softly, and the watch began to tick. Not loud, barely a whisper, but the rhythm matched the pulse of the waves. Inside the glass, the hands were frozen at 11:47. He stared at it until his eyes blurred. That had been the time of the storm, the night she vanished. He slipped the watch into his pocket, its weight small but immense. The ticking followed him back up the hill, echoing faintly against the stones. Inside the lighthouse, the sound seemed to merge with everything. The hum of the lantern, the creak of wood, the sigh of the sea. It wasn't intrusive. It was rhythmic, steady, grounding. The heartbeat of something larger than himself. He placed the watch on the table beside the seashell, the two objects glinting softly in the morning light. The shell was still warm. The watch impossibly was not. For the rest of the day, Elias worked in silence. He polished the glass of the lantern, oiled the gears, checked the flame. Each task felt slower, more deliberate. He was aware of every movement, every breath, as if he were part of the mechanism itself. The keeper kept not just by duty, but by something sacred. At dusk, when he climbed to the top, the horizon had begun to fade into violet. He looked down toward the rocks where he'd found the watch. The tide had risen, erasing all footprints. The sea was smooth again. He lit the lantern. The flame flared, then steadied, filling the room with soft amber light. The beam turned outward, stretching into the darkening air. As the first sweep passed over the waves, something shimmered. Just beyond the reach of the rocks, a shape moved. Small, delicate, rippling with faint light. He leaned forward, breath held. It was the shell. No shell. Another one. Drifting just beneath the surface, glowing faintly, carried by the tide toward the shore. He watched as the light faded, swallowed again by the deep. The watch ticked in his pocket, steady and sure. And for the first time in years, Elias whispered something he hadn't dared say aloud. "Thank you." The foghorn answered in the distance. Long, low, almost human. The lantern turned once more, and the light stretched across the water like a hand reaching home. He stayed at the window until the stars appeared, until the ticking and the hum became one seamless sound, the sound of the sea keeping its promises. The next days slipped past in a strange rhythm, not counted in hours or sunrises, but in waves. Elias had stopped marking time in the logbook. The entries no longer fit inside the narrow lines meant for weather and wind. Everything he wrote now seemed to belong to a different kind of record, one the sea itself might read. The pocket watch still ticked softly on the table, a sound that had somehow synced with the lantern's slow rotation. Tick-turn, pause. Tick-turn, pause. The two machines, one born of metal and one of flame, had begun to breathe together. Elias spent long hours by the water. The tide had grown restless, not violent but purposeful. Each day it seemed to bring something new. A piece of driftwood shaped like a heart, a fragment of porcelain from a forgotten ship, the delicate skeleton of a small fish gleaming like glass. He gathered each one and placed it carefully in the lighthouse, as if assembling a message he hadn't yet learned to read. The fog returned at dusk, rolling over the cliffs with the patience of old ghosts. The world dimmed to pearl gray, and from somewhere within it came that low hum again, the same vibration he had felt beneath the waves. He closed his eyes and listened. It wasn't just sound now. It was movement, a pulse rising from the earth, traveling through his feet, up his spine, settling behind his heart. The same rhythm that lived inside the sea, the same rhythm that turned the light. When he opened his eyes, the fog seemed alive. Threads of faint light shimmered within it, weaving together like veins of gold beneath the skin of the world. They gathered near the waterline, swirling slowly, and then, impossibly, began to take shape. A figure, luminous and soft-edged, stood at the edge of the tide. Not fully formed, but unmistakably her. He didn't move, didn't breathe. The air was thick with the scent of rain and salt and something faintly floral, jasmine perhaps, or memory. Her voice, when it came, was quieter than the foghorn but clearer than thought. "You kept the light." He swallowed hard. His reply caught somewhere between his chest and throat. I didn't know how to stop. She smiled, a fragile curve that seemed made of light itself. That's why it's still here. The fog shimmered around her, folding in and out of her outline. The lantern beam reached them both now, sweeping across her face every few seconds, each pass making her a little more solid, a little more real. Elias stepped closer, the sand soft beneath his boots. "Why now?" he whispered. "Because you've learned to listen," she said. "The tides remember what the heart forgets." He wanted to reach for her, but something, respect, reverence, perhaps fear, held him still. The sea moved between them, small waves lapping gently at their ankles. For a moment, he thought the entire ocean was breathing with them. The light turned again, and for that single instant, they were both bathed in gold. When it passed, she was gone. Only the sound of water remained, soft and infinite. Elias stood there until the stars began to show, their reflections trembling on the surface. Then he knelt, dug his hands into the wet sand, and felt something hard beneath his fingers. He pulled it free, a small piece of glass worn smooth, the color of her eyes. He held it up toward the light, and for a heartbeat, it caught the lantern's glow perfectly, reflecting it back toward the tower. He smiled faintly and whispered to the sea, "Then I will keep listening." The tide reached forward once, brushed his boots, and withdrew, as if answering. When he returned to the lighthouse, he placed the glass beside the shell and the watch. 3 offerings now, 3 promises. Outside, the beam turned, endless and patient. Inside, the ticking matched it, steady, steady, steady. A keeper's heart beating in time with the sea that would never forget him. For 3 nights, the sea remained calm, unervingly calm, the kind of quiet that doesn't soothe but waits. Elias felt it in the bones of the lighthouse, the stillness before something remembered itself. Even the gulls had disappeared, leaving only the sound of the tide pulling gently, rhythmically, as though counting time before an arrival. On the 4th night, the wind returned. Not all at once, but in whispers, a low, rising murmur that slipped through cracks in the window frames and made the lantern glass hum. Elias lit the flame early, out of instinct more than need. The first rotation of the beam stretched across the dark sea, bright and sure, a heartbeat against the growing void. By dusk, the horizon had turned the color of bruised steel. The air thickened, heavy with the taste of rain. He could feel it building in the distance, the storm he had known would come again, not new but remembered. He stood at the top of the tower, both hands pressed to the glass, and waited for the first sound of thunder. Came like an echo from the past. Low, reluctant, the kind that doesn't start a storm but wakes one. The wind rose quickly, twisting itself around the tower in long, keening notes. The waves below began to break harder, striking the rocks with dull, resonant thuds. The air filled with salt and foam, and the first drop of rain hit the glass with a single, distinct tap, like the beginning of a long-forgotten song. Elias moved with practiced precision. He secured the shutters, checked the oil, tightened the bolts that anchored the lantern frame. But tonight the storm felt different, alive, deliberate. The wind didn't just push against the tower, it circled it, testing each seam, each breath of flame. When the thunder cracked again, closer this time, the light flickered. He steadied it with both hands. The beam wavered, caught itself and steadied. He exhaled. "Hold," he whispered, as if speaking to the light itself. Outside, The sea answered with a surge so powerful that it shook the stones under his feet. The lantern rattled in its housing. The tower groaned. And then, through the roar of the wind, came something else. Voice. Faint but unmistakable. Elias. He froze. The name was carried not by the air but by the water, echoing up through the sound of waves striking rock. He turned toward the window, but all he could see was rain and shadow. The voice came again, clearer this time, threaded through the storm like music rising through static. Keep the light. He gripped the railing, eyes wide. I am, he said aloud, the words torn from his throat. I never stopped. The storm raged harder, as if answering. Lightning split the horizon, a quick, blinding stroke that illuminated everything. The waves, the sky, and for one impossible heartbeat, a figure standing on the rocks below. She was there. The same silhouette he had seen before. Hair whipping, hands raised, eyes fixed on the light. He stumbled down the stairs, heart pounding, each step echoing like a drumbeat through the hollow tower. The door fought him when he tried to open it, the wind clawing at the frame. When it finally gave, the rain hit him like a wall, cold, sharp, relentless. He stepped into it anyway. The beam of the lighthouse swept past, painting the storm in flashes of gold. Between each pass, darkness swallowed the world whole. He ran down the hill, slipping on wet stone, his coat flaring behind him. The wind howled, tearing at his breath. At the base of the cliff he stopped. The tide was monstrous now, waves crashing and retreating like the heaving of some enormous creature. Through the chaos, he could see her again, standing on a rock just beyond reach, her shape flickering between water and light. Come back, he shouted, though his voice vanished in the wind. She didn't move. She only looked toward the lighthouse. The beam turned again, passing over her, and she raised her hand toward it, steady, resolute, unafraid. Then lightning struck the sea, and for one blinding moment, light and water became the same thing. The world vanished into brightness. When Elias opened his eyes, he was on his knees in the sand, soaked to the bone. The storm had already begun to move away, rolling inland. The air was sharp with ozone. The lighthouse still stood, its beam turning, unbroken. He looked toward the rocks, but she was gone. Only the water moved now, calmer, almost kind. He dragged himself to his feet, breath ragged, and began the climb back to the tower. The path shimmered faintly, as though something unseen walked beside him. Inside, the flame burned steady. The glass of the lantern was wet with condensation, and on it, traced faintly by an unseen hand, were 3 words. I remember you. Elias touched the glass, and it was warm, warmer than it should have been. He whispered, almost smiling through his exhaustion, so does the light. The sea answered with a single deep wave, a sound of finality, not loss but return. When the storm left, it did not leave quietly. It slipped away, reluctant, dragging its roar to the horizon until even thunder grew shy. The sea exhaled once and fell into perfect silence, as if the whole world had paused to listen for what might come next. Elias woke to the hush. It was the kind of silence that felt heavier than sound. Every surface of the lighthouse, the glass, the stones, even the wooden stairs, glistened with moisture left by the rain. The air was cool and clean, carrying the faintest scent of ozone and salt. He rose from his chair and climbed to the lantern room. The light still turned, slow and sure, its glass polished by the storm's breath. He leaned against the railing and looked out. The ocean lay utterly still, a perfect mirror, reflecting the pale dawn sky. There were no waves, no foam, not even ripples against the rocks. The sea was sleeping. He had never seen it like this. Even the wind had disappeared. He opened one of the small hatches and let the quiet seep in. It was so deep it felt sacred, like stepping into a cathedral made of air and water. The beam of the lighthouse stretched far over the calm surface, cutting through the faint mist and tracing a single golden path that never broke. He thought of her again, not as a ghost, not as a dream, but as part of this stillness. Her voice, her light, her reflection, all of it seemed to live inside the calm, breathing with it. He went down to the beach. Each step echoed, crisp against the wet sand. The sea did not answer. Its silence was complete, a hush so perfect that it felt as though the ocean were holding its breath. The horizon shimmered faintly, a thin band of silver where water met sky. He could see for miles, yet the world felt smaller than ever, as if folded gently around him. When he reached the shoreline, he stopped. Something rested at his feet, half buried where the tide had stopped moving. A piece of driftwood, worn smooth and white as bone. He bent to pick it up and saw that it was carved, faint, almost erased, with a small symbol, 2 stars side by side. The same stars she had painted once, long ago. On that red board the sea had returned. He turned the wood over in his hands, tracing the grooves, feeling the story of it, the softness of age, the persistence of time. The water hadn't destroyed it. It had kept it safe. He looked up at the horizon again. For a brief moment, he thought he saw her there, not as before, not formed of fog or memory, but as a shimmer, a suggestion of presence that rippled across the still surface of the sea. She didn't move. She didn't need to. Elias smiled, small and quiet. "I understand," he whispered. "You wanted me to see this." The water at his feet shifted once, not enough to wet his boots, just enough to leave a single line of foam curling around the piece of wood in his hands, as if in acknowledgement. Then it stilled again. He walked back slowly, the lighthouse gleaming in the morning light. The air hummed softly, almost inaudibly, like the echo of a distant song. When he reached the tower, he placed the carved driftwood beside the watch, the glass shard and the seashell. 4 gifts now, 4 memories, each one breathing faintly, each one alive. He stood there a long time looking at them. Then, without meaning to, he whispered, "I think she's teaching the sea how to be still." The lantern turned above him, and the room glowed with soft light. Outside, the reflection of the beam crossed the glassy surface again and again, cutting through the horizon like a thread of gold stitching the world together. As the day faded into another pale evening, Elias wrote a single line in his logbook. No date, no weather, no tide height. Just words. "The light is calm tonight. So am I." The stillness did not last forever. It never does, not even for the sea. On the second evening after the calm began, Elias heard it, a sound so faint he first mistook it for the creak of the tower's wood. But it came again, low and deliberate, rising from below the cliffs. Not thunder, not wind. Something else. Something alive. He descended the stairs slowly, lantern in hand, the small flame swaying with his steps. The light painted soft circles along the walls, revealing the curve of the stone, the marks of his years, the quiet fingerprints of solitude. When he stepped outside, the night was still, the air thick and cool. The tide had returned, moving gently against the rocks. Yet beneath that rhythm, deeper than the sound of water, there was another tone, a hum that seemed to vibrate through the bones of the world. He followed it down to the shore. Each step echoed against the sand, the sound swallowed quickly by mist. The moon hung low, trembling on the surface of the sea like a coin about to sink. Then the hum grew stronger. The waves glowed faintly, pale blue light blooming beneath their crests, like the heartbeat of something vast just below the surface. Elias froze, watching as the water began to pulse in time with a faint ticking of the pocket watch in his coat. He knelt, setting the lantern on a rock beside him. The glass flickered as the light from beneath the waves brightened, painting his face in shimmering reflections. For a moment he felt it, the same warmth he'd felt in the dream, a recognition, a reunion. The sea began to move. Not wildly, not with violence, but with intent. The tide curved inward, drawing patterns in the sand like handwriting, lines and swirls, circles that connected and faded. He stepped closer, and as he watched, the shapes aligned into something he could almost understand. It was a map, not of places but of memory. The curved lines mirrored the coastline, the dots marking moments, not locations. The night she left, a storm, the return of the watch. Each event recorded, not by hands or words, but by the rhythm of the sea. He whispered, "You've been keeping time." The waves shimmered in response, the hum deepening, vibrating through his chest. He felt it move up his spine, a soft resonance that wasn't frightening. It was familiar. The sea wasn't speaking to him. It was speaking with him. Then, as suddenly as it began, the glow faded. The hum softened until it was nothing more than the ordinary sigh of the tide. Only one small wave lingered, curling around his boots, leaving behind something smooth against the sand. He reached down and lifted it. A small stone, round and dark, polished to perfection. Carved into its surface were the same two stars that had followed him through the years. He closed his hand around it and whispered into the dark, "Is this the last piece?" The sea gave no answer, but the lantern flame flickered, once, twice, before steadying again. He stood there a while longer, the sound of the ocean washing through him. When he finally turned back toward the lighthouse, he carried the stone with both hands, as if it were something sacred. Inside, he placed it beside the others: the shell, the watch, the glass, the carved driftwood. 5 gifts now, each a chapter, each a whisper of the same promise. Nothing is lost. The light from the lantern room reached down the stairs, spilling across the table. It gleamed off each object, and for an instant, they all seemed to glow together. Small reflections of the greater light above, bound by something unseen. Elias sat beside them, the hum of the tower and the rhythm of the sea mingling in the air. He didn't write in the logbook that night. Words no longer seemed enough. Instead, he whispered softly, to the sea, to her, to the light itself, "I'm listening." The ocean outside answered, not in sound, but in stillness. A stillness so deep it could only belong to something eternal. And when Elias finally closed his eyes, the lighthouse kept turning, slow and steady, its beam sweeping endlessly across the horizon. The voice of the deep, remembering. By the following dawn, Elias knew that something within the sea had shifted again. The air held a weight that wasn't quite wind, an invisible pull that threaded through the stillness, drawing him closer to the edge of the world he knew. The lighthouse hummed more softly that morning, its beam dimming with each rotation as though even light needed to rest. He went outside barefoot, his steps leaving clear prints on the cold sand. The tide had risen higher than usual, curling gently around the rocks like fingers reclaiming something once lost. The sea no longer sounded distant. It breathed in rhythm with him, quiet and patient, each wave echoing inside his chest. Down by the waterline, a soft shimmer caught his eye. At first, he thought it was a reflection of the lantern's beam. But the light came from below the surface, deep and slow, pulsing like the heart of the ocean itself. The color wasn't white or gold, but something between, a tone of memory, something he could feel more than see. He knelt. The glow grew stronger. It wasn't a trick of light. It was rising closer with every breath. And as the sea opened its surface, something emerged. Smooth, delicate, and round. A pearl, impossibly large, lifted by the tide as if presented by unseen hands. Elias reached out. The moment his fingers brushed it, warmth spread through him. A sound rose, soft at first like the beginning of rain, then deeper, clearer. Voices layered upon one another, hundreds of tones moving as one, not speaking but remembering. He saw fragments within the glow. The woman smiling, the painted stars, the storm, the gifts, the long years of waiting. They unfolded not as visions but as feelings. Warmth, salt, laughter, light. The story wasn't being told to him. It was being returned. He whispered, "So this is what you kept?" The sea answered with a low hum, so deep it shook the stones beneath his knees. The pearl trembled once, then dissolved into light, not vanishing but spreading outward, flowing through his hands, through the sand, through the air. The glow reached the lighthouse, climbing its walls like a tide of memory. For a few heartbeats, the entire tower shone. The stone, the glass, even the flame within the lantern, all pulsing in harmony with the sea. Then the light softened and settled, leaving behind a silence that was not empty but full. Elias stood slowly. The water reached for him again, gently touching his feet before receding, as though inviting him to follow. He looked out at the horizon. The line between sea and sky had disappeared. There was only light, endless, steady, forgiving. He knew then what the tide had been preparing him for all this time. Not an ending, not a vanishing, a return. He turned once to look at the lighthouse. The beam still turned, calm and certain. He smiled, small and tired but peaceful. "I'll keep it burning," he whispered, "until you don't need it anymore." The water rose to meet him, slow and kind. He didn't resist. It wrapped around his legs, his waist, his chest, each wave lighter than the one before, until the sea lifted him gently, as if cradling him like a child. For a moment, the light from the lantern swept across him, gold against the silver sea. Then the beam moved on, searching the horizon again. When the tide withdrew, the beach was empty, save for a single footprint and the faint shimmer of salt caught in the sand, glowing softly in the morning sun. Inside the lighthouse, the watch ticked once more, steady, sure, and the lantern continued to turn, sending its golden arc out into the endless waiting sea. 4 days after the tide took him, the lighthouse stood motionless, its stones gleaming beneath the soft wash of dawn. The sea had changed again, quieter, almost reverent. Waves rose and fell in long, even sighs, never striking the rocks with their old impatience. The wind, too, had forgotten how to speak. It moved instead in small gestures, carrying the faint scent of salt and oil, the trace of a keeper who had never truly left. Inside, everything remained as Elias had left it. The chair by the window, the logbook on the table, open to a half-written page. The collection of small offerings on the shelf, shell, glass, driftwood, stone, watch, each one glimmering faintly in the lantern's reflected light. The lamp still turned. Its rhythm had not faltered. Some said lighthouses could run on their own once a keeper's hands had tuned them perfectly, but this one seemed to breathe differently now. Slower, deeper, like it had learned the cadence of a human heart. Seabirds began to return, their cries thin and distant. They circled the tower in widening spirals, as if reluctant to land. The villagers on the mainland, seeing the beam each night, believed the keeper still tended it. They never questioned its constancy. And in a way they weren't wrong. Because when fog rolled in again, as it always did, something lingered within it. Sometimes it was a voice, barely audible, calling the same rhythm the sea kept. Sometimes it was only light bending strangely, as if someone had leaned close to the glass and turned the lantern by hand. The tide no longer brought gifts, only small traces of movement. The sand outside the door often held a single footprint that disappeared with the morning sun. Inside, the watch kept time though no one wound it. Its ticking merged with the whisper of the waves, and together they filled the tower with a steady hum, a sound like breath. At dusk, when the first star rose, the lighthouse beam reached across the horizon, finding the same path it always had. But on certain nights, when the moon hung low and the water turned to silver glass, the light curved downward instead of out, as if searching the sea for someone who was no longer separate from it. And on those nights, if you stood by the shore and listened closely, you could hear two sounds layered perfectly together. The steady pulse of the lantern turning, and beneath it the slow, rhythmic whisper of a voice, quiet, calm, eternal, keeping the light. The villagers still tell that story in fragments. Some say the sea took him, others say it let him go. But the old fishermen, the ones who know how to listen to wind and water, tell it differently. They say the sea never takes what it loves, it transforms it. When storms rise now, the beam never wavers. The waves never reach the door. The lighthouse stands like a soul that has learned how to dream while awake. And if you approach it at dawn, when the world is between breathing and silence, you might find the faint trace of a man's voice carried on the mist, whispering to no one and to everything. Light maintained. Then the beam turns again, brushing the horizon with gold. And the sea answers with a calm that feels almost human. There came a morning when no one could say where the sea ended and the sky began. The horizon dissolved into a single pale gleam, and the lighthouse, bathed in that light, seemed to float, neither anchored to earth nor adrift. The air itself felt hushed, filled with something both infinite and intimate. The lantern still turned, its circle slow and deliberate. Each rotation drew a soft golden path across the sleeping water. From a distance, the tower appeared smaller than before, as if the sea had grown around it to keep it safe. Inside, the air was warm, breathing with the same rhythm the ocean now carried. The watch on the table no longer ticked but pulsed faintly, glowing like a living ember. The seashell hummed softly beside it. The driftwood and glass shards shone as though remembering light. The room was full of quiet things that had learned how to speak without words. When the beam swept outward, the sea answered, not with waves but with light. The surface shimmered, glowing from beneath, each pulse mirroring the lantern's turn. It was no longer reflection. It was communion. The two lights, one of man, one of nature, moved together inseparable. For the first time, the lighthouse itself seemed alive, its stones bright and warm under the sun's first reach. The air vibrated gently, carrying a resonance that might have been wind or might have been breath. Out on the water, a shape appeared. Not a figure this time, but a glow, fluid, vast, shifting colors like memory through mist. It lingered near the rocks, its edges rippling softly. The beam of the lighthouse swept over it once, and for a single perfect heartbeat, the glow and the light met. When they touched, the world paused. Every sound vanished, every motion stilled. The light did not flare or fade. It deepened, as if recognizing itself. The sea rose slightly, not in force but in grace, and the glow spread outward, carrying gold and silver into the open water. Then, gently, the glow folded back into the tide. The sea exhaled, and everything softened. The air brightened, the beam turned again, and the world began to breathe. The villagers on the far shore saw it that morning, a strange radiance that rolled across the water, brighter than dawn yet calm as sleep. Some said it was the sun reflected in the fog. Others said the keeper had returned. But those who had spent their lives at sea, who knew the language of tides, said something different. They said the sea and the light had finally found each other, that the keeper had not gone, only crossed into what he had tended all along. And from that day on, the lighthouse's beam changed. It no longer burned pure white but carried a faint shimmer of color, blue at the edges, gold at the heart, as if the sea itself now lived inside the light. When storms came, the tower stood steady. When fog swallowed the coast, the light cut through it with warmth instead of warning. Sailors spoke of feeling calmer when they saw it, as though the sea itself were watching over them. At night, when the world was quiet, the faint hum still rose from the stones, an old patient sound like a lullaby whispered by both earth and water. And if you stood close enough, you might hear it say what every wave, every lantern, every keeper learns in the end. Nothing truly fades. It only finds its way home. Night returns quietly, gentle as breath. The sea glows faintly under a thin veil of stars, and the lighthouse, that old soul of stone and glass, stands serene, its light moving in long, unbroken arcs. No wind disturbs the air. No waves strike the rocks. The world feels suspended, as if time has paused to listen to the rhythm of something infinite. Inside the tower, the beam continues its patient rotation. It no longer belongs to oil or fire. It lives now on memory. Each turn sends a warm, golden pulse through the mist, as if the sea itself were breathing with it. The hum that fills the air is not from gears or wind, but from the slow heartbeat of everything that remains. There is no keeper here now, not in the way people imagine. Yet the presence lingers, not seen, not heard, but felt. The chair by the window still holds the faint impression of a man who waited, who watched, who never stopped listening. The logbook lies open on the table, its last page glowing faintly, the ink shimmering under the lantern's light. The words are simple, written in a steady hand that knew peace. The light will remember. Outside, the sea stretches endless and silver, its surface moving in slow, graceful waves. Each one carries a glint of gold, fragments of the lighthouse's beam scattered across the water like stars that have fallen home. The villagers on the mainland still see the light at night. Some claim it shines brighter when the fog thickens. Some say that during storms, when all other signals vanish, this one grows warm, not blinding, not harsh, but kind, as if the ocean itself were guiding its children back to shore. Sometimes on the quietest nights, when the tide is low and the air perfectly still, A faint outline can be seen in the lantern room, the silhouette of a man standing beside the great lens, his hand resting gently against the glass. He doesn't move, doesn't fade. The light passes through him, carrying him outward into the dark. And the sea responds, always. A wave will rise, subtle but certain, brushing the base of the tower like a greeting. The sound it makes is neither crash nor sigh, but something softer, something like a promise. In that rhythm, light and water are no longer two things. They have become one endless pulse. The keeper's name drifts in the wind now, carried between the turning light and the rolling tide, repeated by gulls and whispered by fog. But he is not gone. He is what the sea remembers, what the lantern breathes, what every sailor feels when the night is long and the horizon invisible. He is the calm that follows storms, the shimmer on still water, the soft hum in every returning tide. And when dawn finally breaks, spilling gold across the horizon, the lighthouse gleams once more, its glass alive, its beams stretching into the light of morning. The sea glows in reply, calm and endless. There are no boundaries anymore. No lines between keeper and sea, between memory and light, between waking and sleep. Only rhythm, only stillness, only peace. The lighthouse turns once more, its beam sweeping wide and gentle, brushing across the sleeping world. And for those who listen closely, the wind still carries his final whisper. I am home.